that you are aware of that. We know that there's a point in our agenda, item 17.0, for questions from the public, and we can have you present a question in the chat feature to the link if you are listening on live stream, and that is monitored for to us. I'd like to acknowledge that today's board meeting is taking place within the traditional territory of the Lake and additions to the agenda. I would like to add reserve policy survey under ECSTA. It's a specific item on the agenda. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by David, seconded by Aaron. All in favor? Carried. We do not have any presentations and delegations, so we'll move on to item 4.0, trustee input and celebrations, and we will start with Trustee Campbell.
And I don't have anything to report.
Trustee Campbell has nothing to report. Trustee Evans?
Just that I attended the provincial council meeting on Saturday, and that's pretty much it this month.
Trustee Gillis?
Just reached out to my 3 liaison principals and plan to meet up with the 2 in town soon. And I continue to have conversations with the principal council regularly. That's about it.
All right. And Vice Chair Newman sends her regrets tonight. Trustee Scott Moncrief?
Nothing done.
Trustee Snow?
I stopped into Ambrose last week, and today I was over at the high school for a visit. And congratulate our new principal while I was there.
Thank you. So I've attended some PAC meetings, and I continue to be impressed by the many ways our schools are supported by our PACs. I appreciated seeing the recent posts regarding this on our district web page and pictures related to Charlie Lake students using 3D pens as part of the ADST resources that have just been added. For my liaison schools, I would like to note the PAC Pancake Breakfast at Albano that took place on February 12th, and Ann Roberts Young did Valentine donuts for the school on February 12th as well. Rotary Club involvement and work with Ann Roberts Young with Margaret Murray on grant writing and fundraising resulted in approximately $75,000 more coming to the school for completion of that playground. Some of it was through fundraising, but there was a lot of grants. So in total, that's what the Rotary Club is involved with. And that was acknowledged in the same way as the Northern Stream was. So that was nice to see. Very pleased to see that our schools continue to do outreach with our seniors. North Peace Seniors Housing Society appreciated Valentine's cards that were produced by students at Albano, Charlie Lake, and Bird Ambrose. And our schools are continuing to work hard to make sure that students enjoy a range of activities in spite of COVID-19, including continued outdoor events for students. I got some great pictures from Mrs. Burge's grade 2 adventures in Kinley Park last week that included snowshoeing, sled races, and Inuit games. I know Upper Pine is planning a winter carnival this week, and I'm really hoping that we'll still have the right kind of snow left for their activities given our warm winds the last few days. Pink Shirt Day is coming up, and most of our schools will be celebrating or recognizing Pink Shirt in some day in some format. The message of kindness and respect is one that's evident in our schools all the time, not just on Pink Shirt Day. In our recent framework presentation for Ann Roberts Young, we know that those students will be rocking their new pink shirts that speak to school connectedness and that kindness is important. Now, those t-shirts are really interesting because they represent input from all school stakeholders. Students, staff, and parents were involved in the development of the school's guiding words, and the pack is arranged with 3 community sponsors for the shirts, and every single student will have a shirt, and they, on a monthly basis, have a pink shirt day. And in their framework presentation, they acknowledged that their guiding concept is We Rock, and that they want their school community to be welcoming, empathetic, respectful, open-minded, cooperative, and caring, and lastly, kind. I've had numerous Zoom board chair calls with both the BCST and Mr. Whiteside. The information has been shared with you, your trustees and district staff. I continue to be thankful for the strong relationships in our district, the work of our staff, because our district has a tone that is far more positive than what I'm hearing in other places. Right now, I'm participating in the framework for learning and gearing up strategies, gathering information that will be helpful for our strategic planning process for next year. Again, we are ahead of other districts because of our internal framework for enhancing student learning processes. They were put in place prior to some of the more recent ministry changes. And in addition to giving useful information, these sessions are also modeling and building familiarity with technology tools such as Zoom breakout rooms, polls, I know how to put stickies up now. Do it very well, but you can. But they really are trying to, I think, support understanding for both, because these sessions are for both district staff and any trustees, technology and the support of online gathering of information in case we're all not back to being able to do more face-to-face next year. So it's been good work. Right, moving on to 5.0, minutes of the regular board meeting of January 25th. And those are pages 6 to 12 in your agenda package. We give people a chance to look at them. And then move on. Right. Do I have a mover? Moved by Aaron, seconded by David. Are there any errors or omissions in these minutes? Calling the question then. In favor? Moving on to 5.2, business arising from the minutes. We have our action item list that was attached with ongoing things. Under business arising from the minutes, I included 2 pieces of information for you. And we should have thought this was not to watch tonight because I'd like to share that the healthcare information that you see there is a legacy of the work that Gene Leahy started with our school district and is being carried on by Margaret Little. And one of the things that has happened is Brian Campbell has met with Margaret a couple of times now, and there's an ongoing dialogue back and forth between the Save Our Northern seniors and various people within the school district in terms of supporting seniors, which is nice to see. The other piece that Brian and I went back and forth on is the concept of perhaps down the road when our Makers Making Change project through the Neil Squire Society takes on a new project, there may be a link to doing some kind of development of particular items through that 3D printing technology that would be helpful to our seniors as well. So hopefully something will come of that.
Can I also say too, Helen, because of this work too, I'm guessing this is from it, but the college is hosting some students from Burt Bowes, and they specifically requested to talk to the nursing program.
There's a
At
lot
the
of talk
college, yeah, so it
about
was,
the nursing program and how that's going to perhaps help. So that was included there just so that you know that that work is ongoing. We'll move on to 6.0 minutes of our regular special board meeting, February the 15th. That's pages 13 to 14 in your agenda package. Wasn't very much. There's not very many minutes, so can I have a first or mover and seconder, please? Moved by Bill, seconded by Aaron. I don't think there could be any errors or omissions. It's a pretty short 7 minutes. All in favor? Carried. All right, moving on to the approval of the excerpts of the regular board meeting, December 2020. Mover and seconded for those, moved by David, seconded by Ida. And she actually just did it. Trustees Scott Moncrief and Trustee Campbell. Calling the question, all in favor? Announcements and reminders. Are there any additions to our announcements and reminders?
On March 1st, we have a
Framework presentation?
Yeah.
it's there.
oh, yeah.
We did add that in, so it is there. I'm not sure which schools are up. So which schools we're doing on the first one.
I can tell you in a minute.
Pardon?
I can tell you in a minute.
Okay.
Burt Bowes, Hudson's Hope, Baldonnel, and Indigenous Ed.
Yes, so there's 4. Hudson Hope and Indigenous Ed. Okay. Moving on then to 9.0 senior staff reports.
Thank you, Chair. Superintendent's report, there's a number of items. The first one, first one's a regular sort of activity report from HR. Item number 2 under HR is a workforce report, which will become a regular part of the superintendent's report for these meetings in terms of attendances for teachers and support staff. And the third part there now is the superintendent's report online, which I'll refer to now on the screen, and you have that up there, Leah? Is that right? Is the camera focused on the screen? Sorry. Thank you. All right, and so just going through this report, first item under the standing COVID updates, of course, public and staff can find out more information about updates, guidelines, and everything that the district is doing on that link where it says the here. Also, just to inform the board and the public that SD60 has been asked by the province as one of the 6 health regions to lead what they've called the rapid response team as a follow-up to the updated guidelines and process that the ministry rolled out a couple of weeks ago. And in talking with the ministry, it's absolutely due to the sort of ability of our district and the capacity and the way that they've handled the health and safety guidelines so far. And so we'll be supporting Northern Health as well as our colleague districts for the entire northern region up until the end of June. More information from that process I'll be able to present next month. It doesn't officially start until the beginning of March, but we've already connected with Northern Health. The team will be composed of myself, our safety officer, Sabrina Worden, and Sharon Shell is going to help us with clerical. And on the Northern Health side, we have Dr. Kling, we have Katrina Bryant, Sarah Brown, and Milan Knightley. So together we're going to form a team, and we've already set up weekly meetings to take a look at what's happening around the Northern Health region. And essentially, our role is to support other school districts, including independent schools, in some of their documentation and processes if they need help with that, as well as follow up if there is a major event. And we'll do a bit of an analysis and provide a report for the minister. Fun picture here out of Ms. Braun's window out at Upper Pine, and of course they do take care to make sure that if there is a wild animal out there that they've made changes to the playground schedule so that they're not out there at the same time. But, she enjoyed that photo. Under our framework for enhancing student learning, intellectual development, just updating the public around a couple of things we're working on in reading and numeracy. So School District 60 has had for a number of years a very particular set of reading materials for our fall and spring assessments. And we're updating those, and through some research, our principal of curriculum, Charmaine Chrétien, has connected with the Camden School District that put quite a lot of effort into updating their reading materials. And so we're working with them to use essentially their templates and their stories and reading selections, which are far more relevant, authentic, including specific tie-ins to some of to Indigenous culture and Indigenous ways of knowing and learning. So we're in the process of piloting those, coding them, and calibrating with teams of teachers. Similarly, we're using the basis of our MAC tool, Mathematics Assessments and Practice. Teams of teachers with our admin are creating assessments that will be able to track and make part of our aggregate achievement information for the board. Just some information on athletics and services. Also, of course, it's Black History Month. There were a number of things going around around the district. And mainly for staff, there is a link here if you did want to check out some different resources. So it takes you to our curriculum and resource page. And on the left-hand side, there's specifically Black History Month resources that teachers can go to. It includes several links, and teachers are sharing their lessons around the district. An update around the science fair for 2021. They're sort of doing their very best to make sure there is still something available. It is going to be virtual. It will be held in between a period of time as opposed to on one day, March 29th to Thursday, April 1st. And so they're trying to navigate all of there's several obstacles to how to set this up to make sure we're following all of the privacy pieces. And so some schools are connecting and students will be taking part, but it certainly won't be the same uptake that we've seen in previous years. The science fair in general, just so the trustees, to remind you that the science fair is an opportunity. It doesn't replace the science curriculum. It is not the only science assessment that is done in schools. It's a neat opportunity which responds quite well to the core competencies of communication, presenting something, as well as the scientific method as it relates to the science curriculum. So there are a number of staff involved in that. Under Human and Social Development, once again, Black History Month, I'm providing some images here. This is of a particular Black artist that the Monterey school community did some research on, and then in the same style, had the students complete some of that artwork. So there's some examples here. And you can click on them to see them a bit bigger. For example, if I click on that one, you can see them a bit better and scroll from one to the next. And the very first one gives you a bit of a quick piece of information around the artist herself. Also under Human and Social Development, a team of staff, including Carleen Andrews, Pat Jansen, and some of the other Indigenous education staff, continue to make their way around the district, giving presentations to all of our schools and their staffs in terms of what is the local education agreement, what are its implications, and helping staff and administration fully understand what that implementation means. And the good news is that these presentations are always followed by requests from the teachers and administrators for follow-up workshops, coaching, collaboration, and connections with our Indigenous Education Center. Under Career and Skill Development, there's a number of items this evening. I threw in this one. It was quite interesting. It must be some kind of initiative around online production or assistant training. So mainly for older students, 15 and above. They have to have a social insurance number, but these are free production courses that give them some insight as well as some very specific skills around film production that could lead to employment opportunities. So that's worth checking out for parents or students of that age. Some information on a Women in Trades event that was held at Dr. Kearney, and they were able to connect virtually with a number of different people in Canada, leaders, and just a couple of quick pics of some of our students from Dr. Kearney who were able to participate in that. Further information around our career programs can be outlined here in this link for February 2021, provided by Mr. Campbell, our district principal for international career programs. Under operations and HR, trustees will find, and the public, in the attached agenda, just again, those charts that show some of the attendance graphs for our staff. And once again, we sort of are under the average attendance trends and patterns, so we have fewer absences than the average of the province. Also quite excited about a new safety website on Sharepoint for our staff. And this brings all of our safety information into one place. All of the poster information, the processes if someone gets injured, the links to the forms that they can fill out, including the 6A form, all of that stuff will be able to be done very shortly, I think by spring break, on this one location. Similarly, tech services for the school district are doing a weekly update for staff in terms of things that are happening around the district and some of the tech updates and the resources that are available. So you can click there to check out what they've been doing. Under Truth and Reconciliation, there's a background here. It's a good one on citizenship, so I encourage trustees and public to read up on that. And just a bit of an update around the equity scan, and this is happening around the province, where other districts in the same position as SD60, where we were rolling out the equity scan this year, have really had to put things on hold, as most of the community, and this is certainly the case here, would prefer to meet in person, rather than just simply respond to survey questions or do things virtually through Zoom. Joe Heslip, the Ministry of Education representative, is encouraging this. He's saying you need to listen to your community, and several districts are in the same kind of holding pattern right now. Carleen Andrews is leading this initiative and will certainly be involving people like Trustee Evans and our chair in terms of what those next steps will be when they come. Just to let you know, however, we're quite pleased with some of the additional support through the federal funds. We've hired additional staff, and they've been working for over 4 or 5 weeks now with specific Indigenous families for those kids that did decide to stay home. And we're able to keep them connected to the school with some extra teacher staffing, and they're preparing materials and keeping them connected to the school. Finally, under Take 3, trustees and public can browse through some of the pictures. We've got Preston 2 doing their science. Taylor Elementary School has this really neat reading challenge going on. So kids walk by and they can see how many bricks that book titles and binders that their class are piling up on the wall. So it's been quite successful so far. And CM Finch here, also just some pictures of some of the STEM projects they were working on in February. That is my report for the online portion. The next item is asking the trustees to approve an out-of-district field trip. It's a ski trip for international students to Powder King. That information is included. And finally, asking for a motion to approve the BEA course Working in Natural Gas 12, which will be another course available to our students. And that is my report. Thank you, Chair.
Could I get a mover and seconder for Stephen's report other than the recommendations at this point? So moved by trustee Scott Moncrief, seconded by trustee Evans. And if we can go through item by item on the report for questions that we may have of Stephen, and then we will call the question on that and make the recommendation for motions that we have. Alan Holland has had some really cute posts about watching for moose in the neighborhood on an ongoing basis on the Facebook page. One of the questions I had on the district reading assessment, Stephen, relates to the concept that we're calibrating those assessments and for further work down the road. At one point, the Ministry of Education would say, this district is like your district. And so you could look at your results in comparison. That, I think, out of this would be helpful for us to be able to look at. Kamloops has been using this tool over time as maybe a calibration point for our district results in comparison to another district. And it is costly to change.
These are free.
So those are free, so that's huge. I do know that some of the reading passages that we're using, especially out of that at the grade 7 level, the grade 6 level, have many complaints from teachers about cultural relevance. So I'm sure you'll have some teachers who are glad that we're looking at something different. And the feedback on the quality of this tool from our staff here are really interesting.
Thanks for the reminder. If I could just publicly thank the Kamloops School District for sharing their resources at no cost with us.
I was going to say Margaret Montgomery always gets, there's never an activity that's not tied into lots of different things, and they're focusing on empathy. So all of their Valentine's hearts and their artwork were related to that, or school connectedness, because they did a huge display of hearts that were Valentines from the students to the school that identified what they liked about their school.
I just had a question to go back to the DRAs, district reading assessments. Are we engaging with some local elders too to make sure that the Indigenous component is local and relevant to the local area?
We are absolutely engaging with local elders. In fact, there's a curriculum committee being set up.
Oh, okay.
And Carlene is leading that as well, and it is in conjunction with our LEAs. However, these particular reading assessments are a very narrow kind of one piece of the puzzle in terms of our reading assessment only. And these are the ones we're using from Kamloops. So it's more of a broader piece around the history of Indigenous people.
Pan-Indigenous kind of
That's
idea,
right.
not focused.
Correct.
Okay.
However, we absolutely have local pieces that are being integrated into the curriculum as well here. Nicole.
I had a question about the workforce.
Yes,
So if I'm looking at this graph.
which one?
So page 4 of 7. So I'm assuming you're giving us this because we're allowed to ask questions, but just, I see this on page 4, this soaring 48 on January 28th.
My apologies, is it for teachers or support staff?
Yes.
I can't see the
EAs.
page.
It would be there's 7 charts, so it's the
Yeah.
4th one. And it just looks
Oh.
like, it just really, there was 48
Yes.
absent one day, not on an illness, but another.
Yes, so that would be for Pro D. They all, 48 of them took training.
Okay, so that's
Jerry.
marked, that's marked as absent.
So it's other, and so only the red is Tuesday.
From the regular duties.
Yeah, from the regular duties, so
Okay.
that could even be like a Pro D day or something specific where all of them are pulled up to do training. Good question.
So it doesn't mean they're away from work, whereas the red line is away from work.
Correct. Blue line is they're still working, it's just that they're doing Pro D or training
Okay,
or some kind of contractual.
okay, I understand. Okay.
Stephen,
Yes.
regarding the same document there.
Okay.
I think I brought this up last time too. I would, the wording of this, it says our staff. And I look at this and I see our selected staff. I don't see all of our groups in here.
Yeah, we don't produce this, the province does.
So the only, with the group that I would see not represented on this would be facilities, but
Facilities,
there is a draft
So,
for custodian in the last
yeah,
one.
facilities, AOs.
Any and all exempt and that kind of stuff. So this is specifically provided by the Ministry of Education.
Yep.
You bet.
Because the way they say it is our staff. And it's not everyone.
Correct.
It's not a bunch of stuff.
Our staff that we track. Yeah. This one here,
Yes,
with that a little bit more,
up or down?
or sorry, wrong one, no, right there. This one here with the,
Online production assistant training.
yes, my nephew is taking the course at SAIT,
Oh,
and when he applied, right away they looked for experience. And it's a very competitive to get into,
interesting.
and they, right away, like most people refused from the course that had worked on radio stations and stuff before.
So this is a supported and
Yeah.
from the film industry, so if our students do apply, they will get into it because it's free.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'm saying this
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
if they want to get into that kind of work,
Yeah.
is a definitely good thing to take.
Fantastic.
I saw his process he had to apply. It was,
I'm frustrated. Any questions on the rest of
I
that?
was just gonna,
Yes.
no, you've got information on the safety website on Sharepoint for staff. At some point, as a board, I'm hoping that you will share that with us so we can see the work that's been done. And when I looked at the weekly updates from technology services that were in there, I went, oh, that's
They
kind of,
just started.
it's just starting, and it was good information for me to have as a board member, even though it's more operational. And I'm wondering if that could be something that got added to the Facebook pages that we have access to on our board SharePoint.
You're making note of that?
I'll bring that, like, when we go into our board SharePoint, there's a place that we can look at every single web page. And being able to, if somebody had a particular interest in keeping up with what we were doing with that department, it would be really good for them
You
to be
betcha.
able to go in and access those weekly updates.
You bet, not a problem. Good suggestion.
One of the things that when I look at, I know it's really significant and important that we've done that delay in the equity scan, but it will be a piece of information that we won't have complete when we look at doing our strategic plan. So that may be an area of the strategic plan we have to come back to once that equity scan is done. Because my understanding is from the districts that have done the equity scans, there's a lot of information that comes out of that they factor into their strategic plan.
They may go hand in hand. So we may be able to come up with a plan in terms of some of the timing, in
that
fact,
aligns.
that it's duly informed for both processes. Hopefully. That's a good point. And then of course there's that, those are the motions after this. Any other questions for my online report?
It's not a question, but the comment about the Taylor reading, what they were doing, I was in school and it was really interesting how the two tiers, that the
Yeah.
4 that were really high and the 1 that was lower, how those kids were telling the other kids how they could build
Get-
their
Give it up.
like how they could do it. And it was really interesting to listen to the kids telling the other ones, well, you know, this is what you need to do to. They weren't using it as a competition, but they were sure encouraging each other.
Yeah, apparently the uptake was really good on that one.
If there's no further discussion related to that part of Stephen's report, call the question.
Sorry, just question. The board courses there.
We're not there yet.
We're not
You're
there.
not there? Okay, sorry. Yeah, we're not, sorry.
All in favor? Right, so Stephen is asking for a separate recommendation from the board to support the ski trip for the international students. Don't know who
He
went first. Moved by trustee Scott Moncrief, seconded by trustee Evans. So calling the question, all in favor of support?
Is there discussion?
Is there any discussion? Sorry.
Are we letting other groups go now too, or?
Yes.
Just on these out of district field trips, we're ensuring that they're not going out of province, correct? Because from what I understand, the recommendation is to stay within.
There will be no trips out of province. Yes. It would be easier to go to Worsley.
Legislative.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
Now I'll call the question. Sorry, I was rushing discussion. All in favor?
It's okay.
All right, and then we have approval for, so we need a recommendation to, if people are willing, to approve a working in natural gas 12 course. That's been submitted. Moved by trustee Evans, seconded by trustee Snow. Any discussion related to this?
My only question is, we get all these board approved courses.
So I'm so sorry.
We get board approved courses all the time. I'm just wondering how many of them actually get used. We get them quite often,
No.
right? But we just don't hear if they're being used and how successful they are.
Yeah, it's a good point because then the.
I know you probably don't know that right now.
No, I don't know. And then the enrollment follows this. And not only that, once the BAA course is there, from year to year, that can also function,
Because we need a teacher to teach this.
of course. Well, and it's kind of like an independent type of course, the way it's
Yeah.
presented here. But yeah, it can fluctuate. I think that in having it proposed in the first place is that the school feels that there would be enough uptake for at least the class.
Do you think that at a later date, it doesn't have to be for the March committee meeting, but maybe April or May or, September, to have some kind of a report on what BAA courses we have and how many are, what the enrollment is for some of those? Because do we go through the same process with the BAA courses that say we do with policy, where we look at it and say, this course is sort of outdated, we should remove this BAA course from our list of courses? That kind of a thing, or does it just, once it's approved, it just sort of sits there forever and then it can come back to life again one day?
Yeah, once it's approved, it's there. We don't sort of ever then disprove or
Yeah.
withdraw that.
That's-
That doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
We don't ever
Withdraw,
withdraw
that's
that
better.
approval. I have to say it could be quite tricky to get that detailed of report. But I could ask in terms of what the uptake has been year to year for each of our BAA courses.
Well, our tracks report lists all the ones that we
Yes.
have. It
Yes,
doesn't list whether they were used that.
that's correct. So would the board like a list of all the BAA courses we have? No problem.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, and if they're being used, do we know if they're being used or were used? Because
I can start with a list of all of our BAA courses. I don't want to commit to something that until I get inside it, I don't know how long it would take to do it.
I heard you.
If you
No,
look
okay,
at,
fair enough.
you could probably do a cross-check by going and looking in the middle of the parent looking at Northeast's calendar and course selection and what's being offered as a course selection.
Well, it's not all the BA courses we have on our list, I can tell you that. Because
I'll ask
otherwise
the
the
question.
catalog would be this thick probably, right?
Just in case something is like totally outdated, that is not proper to teach anymore.
Sure.
Ida?
In the
Well,
regular.
then it just wouldn't be offered because you
Yeah.
wouldn't have a.
So I don't mind going down a rabbit hole as long as it's not, as long as the information is
Yeah.
available. But
Yeah,
I'll
fair
start
enough.
with getting the trustees a list of all of our BEA courses, and I'll ask the question, is there a way of efficiently producing a report that tells us what is the uptake of those courses?
Right, calling the question on this now, all in favor?
Thank you.
Stephen also had the human resources summary report, and I just had a question. That's for, we've got 28 new assignments. Are those new positions that we put people into, or is that people that moved on out of the district? These like some new assignments?
Yes.
Yes, it's both, okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And no, I'm sorry to, it is absolutely both. I can
Okay.
think of some not necessarily newly created positions, but some teachers did leave last month. And then some of those are maternity leaves and sick leaves. And so not necessarily new positions, but new people.
New people, because the reason I ask, if you look at changes to existing,
Yes.
it seems like it's 28 brand new faces to our district.
And in a lot of these cases, it's moving staff around. A number of those would have come off our TTOC list, for example. I can think of a couple right now, right? And in the meantime, we did hire some more TOC capacity, but not enough, to be honest.
And are some of those hirings for next year?
A lot of the hirings right now are for next year. Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just don't know how many of these. It doesn't, I don't know how many of these are for right now.
Yeah, no, I was just going, okay, that's not bad to have some fresh faces at this point.
But what I can say, Trustee Snow, is that many of our schools, to our surprise, are already staffed for next year.
I've been hearing that, but also, I mean, I think with
Sorry,
the,
Madam Chair, we've already approved the
Oh, yes.
superintendent's report. Can we,
You can move along. It was me that took it.
No problem, sorry.
I apologize. Okay, moving on to the Secretary Treasurer's report.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
that's a quick report. Great job, Terry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first thing I've included in my report tonight is a copy of our enrollment projections for the upcoming year, as well as 2022, 23, and 23-24. For next year, we are anticipating approximately, so the number that I'm reading off of is the second line, just above the black. It's 6,116.25 students, which is a change from our previous year, which is up 86.625. It is a small and very conservative estimate for our projection. What we don't want to do is overproject. We would rather be under and be in a position to be able to add versus trying to do reductions at a later date. So the team that I've worked with for all of the areas suggested that we keep the numbers more conservative and take that approach. So we've done that for all of the 3 years. Obviously, the other 2 years rolling out aren't nearly as important, but for 21, 22, the important takeaway there is just that we've done it conservatively. This will create our March funding preliminary announcement that we will use to go into the budget cycle starting in April. So I wanted to include that information in my report, as well as you can see there is a human resources support staff summary included. And that is my report, Madam Chair.
moved by trustee Scott Moncrief, seconded by trustee Snow. Discussion related to this report. Terry, I had a question. If you look at the concept of summer learning, we have 0 students this year with the potential of 90 for next year. Does that relate to the Key Learning Centers program that they have run the last couple of summers, but couldn't because of COVID?
It is absolutely that, Madam Chair.
It's not unusual for our projection to be lower than the next year's. It's better than the other.
Scrabbling.
And I think it's really, we don't know for September how many of those families are going to come back. And what, we may have some come back from distance learning. They're still our students, but there's a number of families that have opted for other independent distance learning schools or other homeschooling options that hopefully they would consider doing that.
Enrollment projections are always a challenge.
Better be conservative though.
Yeah.
Well, our good news is that Orange and Strangler
What
started
we,
back up.
that's,
So we did need some good news because
there's 400 jobs.
I'm happy
There,
about the
and
natural
then
gas
water.
force, but right now that industry is downsizing in this community all over the place. It's kind of scary. Right, any further questions related to Terry's report? Okay. Calling the question now. All in favor? Great. We will move on to the annual amended budget presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I share my screen? Can everybody see that?
No.
No.
No. Okay, what am I doing wrong?
You hit share screen,
I did.
and then at the top it says share your desktop. Is that click highlighted, the top corner left?
No, it's not. So now I got to figure out how to get out of here. Okay. Okay, so let me try this again. Good, put that down. Zoom would like to record this computer screen.
No.
So yeah, I've got a Zoom would like to record this computer screen.
That doesn't sound promising.
No.
So
Yes,
then it's
that's what you
giving,
want.
sorry?
That is what you want. That is giving you Zoom permission to look at your screen.
Okay then, and Ryan, do I need desktop 1 or whiteboard?
Desktop 1.
Okay. Basic share. So now I'm going to try this again. Does that pop up?
I think she still has to finish.
Still not sharing?
No, we don't see it.
Is there, did you check
Okay.
the bottom? Like when you clicked on the desktop one, did you click on the bottom where it says sound and all that? Still,
Desktop one doesn't give me an, oh yeah, so desktop one shares sound. And then share. Now let's try this again. Now did it pop up?
Not
Okay.
Do we have it though, and we could just put it up here?
So one option is to email it to me, Terry, and I can put it up on the screen.
Okay, so give me 5 seconds here, Stephen. I'm gonna send this to you.
So, but the public won't, I mean, they would have it actually.
It's the briefing you're sharing, right? Or wanting
It's
to-
the presentation I'm trying to share.
I can do it here too.
Well, I've got this up already, so.
You won't be able to share it on your,
If she sends me the presentation, I can pull it up.
Yeah, so that's what I have to do is to send.
yeah, it just won't be as clear, but that's okay.
But if it's in our agenda package and it's just about the public seeing,
Is-
we can look it up here. So.
The agenda package is actually available.
Yeah, and I didn't include it in the package, just purely to be able to start fresh.
So have you emailed that to me?
I am still trying to get to my email.
No rush.
Well, kinda. I'm gonna try another device. So I'm just gonna go to my phone.
You know
Give me
what,
a second.
Terry?
Yeah.
Leah has it on Zoom, so she can share the screen. So we'll just get Leah to do it. Thank you, Leah. And you can just talk.
Okay, this is not the one I'm trying to share though, unfortunately.
She's got a second.
So this is a PowerPoint presentation, which is separate.
No problem. I'll
But
pull it up and email it.
that's all right. I'm just going into my mail and I will find it here. And then I'm going to forward this to Stephen right now. Okay, Stephen, I've sent it to you. It's a PowerPoint presentation.
Waiting for that to arrive. There we go. So, Leah, if you can focus in on the main screen up there, and we're ready to go, Terry.
Okay, so basically this is the amended annual budget for 2021. The first set of slides is the enrollment difference between our annual and our amended. We are currently down 195.75 FTE. This is actual FTE enrollment is less than predicted in all categories compared to when the budget was first submitted last June. The slide that you're currently on shows the spread between enrollment predicted in February 2020 for the annual budget versus the annual enrollment for the fall count for the amended for our school-age students. Actual enrollment, you can see, is fairly flat from 18 to 19. Then there is a enrollment increase between 19 and 2020, which is largely due to the cross-enrolled students at distance ed. For 2021, the enrollment gap between the annual and the amended sits at 175. That's just our school-aged FTE. And providing that the DL February and May counts continue to come in as they are, so they stay accurate. If you go to slide 4, this slide is the graphic representation indicating that a majority of the district revenue comes from the Ministry of Education. So 98.8 is our money that comes from the Ministry of Education. If you go to slide 5, you can see here that our operating grants are down significantly due to lower than expected enrollment. So you'll see 1.8 million on the very top line. However, we do see some additional offset revenue that is gained due to miscellaneous income, either our rentals, our school-age therapy, and or miscellaneous Ministry of Ed grants. Overall, the operating grant, which comprises the 98.8 of our district revenue, is less than expected due to overestimating our enrollment projection targets. Slide 6. This slide indicates better the effect of the overestimating of enrollment. You can see that the enrollment-based funding is down 1.2 million. So I've broken it into enrollment-based. If you add those categories together, you'll see that we're down 1.2 million, even with funding protection and the supplement for enrollment decline. The unique student funding is down 712,000. That's due to those areas coming in at lower than projected targets as well. And the general district's portion is up by 148,000. And that's due to our provincial salary being lower than the provincial average. So our school district's average teacher salary is lower than the province. Overall, we're down 1.8 in Ministry of Ed funding. Moving on to slide 7. You can see in the amended budget that projected salaries and benefits are lower in order to meet the reduced enrollment targets. Federal and provincial grants in the Special Purpose Fund have allowed us to keep small class sizes and the majority of staff working with redeployment. Services and supplies expenditures are up due to the board's contribution towards the Ann Roberts Young Elementary Common Space. Going to slide 8 is a graphic which more clearly shows the bulk of our expenses are on salary and benefits versus supplies and services. Roughly these generally tend to come in around 80-20 for the split between those two categories. Moving to slide 9. Overall, the district's operating expenses are lower than originally budgeted due to the lower enrollment, so we've matched that. Operations and maintenance expenses are higher because we're allocating our reserve dollars to cover the board's commitment towards Addre, or Ann Roberts Young. Slide 10. This is a graphic that shows the distribution and percentage by function program overall in the operating expense allocation. So you can see instruction takes up the major portion. Admin is the light yellow, then there's the green is the operations and maintenance, and red is transportation. So it's a graphical representation of the split of the budget. The next slide is our special purpose funds. This is a list of all of the special purpose funds and shows that we generally budget to spend all of the revenues that are given in our special purpose funds, along with the application of some reserves. So some of these accounts may carry a reserve, but generally they are limited to being spent annually. And in this case, it shows that we are receiving 1.3, I think it's, 11,300,000 and something. I can't see quite the bottom. But the difference, so the revenue, what we're spending is 11,488,000, and we have revenue of 11,333. The difference is a contribution of the Special Purpose Reserve Fund of 133 to cover all expenditures for the year. So that's a summary off of the Special Purpose Fund. And then moving on to slide 12, this is the changes to the accumulated surplus deficit in the operating fund. As you can see, only 2019 is the only year where operating expenses exceeded revenues. For 2021, we are budgeting to spend slightly under the projected revenue target by $201,000. The assets purchased from the operating fund include the $1.1 million for Ann Roberts Young, the Bert Bowes field completion, laptop replenishment, there's vehicle, there's a Wenninger music system, copier replacements, and miscellaneous office furniture included in the capital component. The district has also invested in a software upgrade for the finance, HR, and payroll system. They have signed a contract committing them to upgrade the system. And this leaves the board with approximately $2 million in your reserve account. So you'll see 1.9, I can't read it, but 98 something. So approximately $2 million in your reserves remaining. And that is approximately 2.9% of this year's operating expenses. So we're within the target that we have for our reserves. Slide 13 is the last slide, and it summarizes the breakdown of the 2021 amended annual budget bylaw of $86,962,647. It is composed of the operating expense of $68.8 million, tangible capital assets purchased of $2 million, special purpose fund expenses of $11.5 million, and capital fund expenses of $4.6 million. And that completes the presentation summary of the 2021 amended budget. Are there any questions for me regarding the document? Hello?
So I think the Zoom room is muted and they don't know.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Or microphone so they can't hear. There we go.
All righty. I was going to say hello. Is there anybody left in there?
So you didn't hear my question, but everybody else did, and I think Stephen's just going to answer it instead of me repeating it.
Okay.
I think she'll understand the question in the answer.
Yeah.
The big difference this year, and I was actually thinking of this, Nicole, when she was talking about the estimated versus being then under.
Mm-hmm.
We were specifically told by the Ministry of Education, if you remember, not to make staffing changes so that we had available spaces available in all of our classes as part of our transition program that we were required to carry. And that meant once we put staffing in place, we could not then fold divisions throughout the year based on how many families or kids came back or didn't come back. In other words, the ministry said, due to COVID, maintain the capacity of your system. We know lots of your kids have gone to distance ed. We still want you to maintain the space as part of this transition. Unfortunately, it meant there was cost, which is probably why we saw all those provincial and federal grant monies coming to us.
Okay, but so the other part of my question is, so COVID is the reason for the low enrollment, or also did Fort St. John just like not do what we thought it was gonna do? You know, like, did we not see, because that's what it was 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So what can you really?
It's hard to nail down exactly the difference, but what I can say is the vast majority of the underestimate, if we want to call it that, was absolutely due to COVID.
Okay, so then the ministry saying to you, don't collapse any divisions, keep it available.
For this current school year.
Right, puts us at a deficit using our operating reserves, and they're not gonna help us anymore.
Well, no, but they have provided about 750,000 in provincial money,
Okay.
as well as 2.4 million in federal money, some of which has been able to cover our instructional costs.
Okay.
So Terry, I had a
Yes.
question about the federal money. Does it go into miscellaneous revenue, or does it go into the different areas that we applied it to on this budget?
So the federal money is on the special purpose fund grant. So if you went back to the slide, there's one that lists all the grants. The federal grant is included in the special purpose fund.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out what it means.
So right there, so you'll see that the safe return to school provincial and safe return to class federal, those are the two funds that we've got, and those are anticipated to be fully spent.
And you see, that's why, I can't remember if you were here, there's a bit of push and pull right now between staffing levels for next year and what we've been staffed at this year. We don't have any of that money coming in. So in order to staff conservatively, you may have schools asking for more divisions, but we're not in a place till we see those people from September. Is
That is accurate.
Yeah.
Question here. We as a group are always talking about recruiting and retaining people. Did I hear you correctly say that School District 60 has a lower wage for teachers on average than the rest of the province?
No.
We do have a lower wage than those in the province, and it's simply because we have a younger audience and they're earlier in their stage of their career. So we have new teachers starting with a lower salary. So provincially, we have a lower salary than those across the province that have a more formed through their grids.
I was thinking it was that.
Because it makes it sound like.
Yeah.
We have
But
to pay
just
it towards
to
the
tell
grid.
people we would lower average wouldn't sound good. Got that.
No.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, so that just means that they're placed on the grid
Yeah.
at a different spot than if they were like in Surrey or something, usually.
Yeah. Newer teachers earlier in their career make less money than a more seasoned teacher. Absolutely.
Any other questions for Secretary Treasurer Stoneman? So.
I would like to, I would like to motion that the board agree to do all three readings of the bylaw this evening.
That's what we're on the same page. So,
Perfect.
all right, could I please get a motion to have our amended annual budget bylaw done in 3 readings tonight? Moved by Aaron, seconded by Ida. All right, I'm going to move on with the concept of the first reading of the bylaw, and then In the short form, I'm just going to do the second and the third reading for me because I want to see how that process is supposed to work. So the amended annual budget bylaw, a bylaw of the Board of Education of School District Number 60, Peace River North, called the board to adopt the amended annual budget of the board for the fiscal year 2020-2021 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act. As amended from time to time called the Act. The board has complied with provisions of the Act respecting the amended annual budget adopted by this bylaw. This bylaw may be cited as School District Number 60, Peace River North, amended annual budget bylaw for the fiscal year 2020-2021. The attached statement 2 showing the estimated revenue and expense for the 2020-2021 fiscal year and the total budget bylaw of $86,962,647 for the 2020-2021 fiscal year was prepared in accordance with the Act. Statement 2, 4, and Schedules 1 to 4 are adopted as the amended annual budget of the board for the fiscal year 2020-2021. So, I need mover and second. Moved by Trustee Scott Moncrief, seconded by Trustee Snow. Calling the question, all in favor? Okay. So we're going to move on to the second and the third reading in short form. And Trustee
We have to make a motion that it's in short form.
Okay,
So I'll make the motion that we do reading 2 and 3 in short form.
seconded by Trustee Evans. All in favor? Thank you, Ida.
Okay. Second reading, amended annual budget bylaw. Bylaw of the Board of Education of School District 60 to adopt the amended annual budget of the board for the fiscal year of 2020-2021 pursuant to section 113 of the School Act, amended from time to time. And this will include item 1, 2, 3, and 4, with the 3 stating the total budget bylaw amount of $86,962.67 for the 2020-21 fiscal year. And I will move it.
Moved by Ida, seconded by Trustee Evans. All in favor? Second reading is complete. Moving on to the third and final reading of the amended annual budget.
Amended annual budget bylaw, a bylaw of the Board of Education of School District Number 60 to adopt the amended annual budget of the board of fiscal year 2020-21, including 1, 2, 3, and 4, 3 stating that the total budget bylaw amount of $86,962,647 for the 2020-21 fiscal year.
Thank you. Moved by Trustee Gillis, seconded by Trustee Snow. All in favor? Done. All right, moving on.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 11, reports of the regular committee of the whole meeting February 8th, pages 18 to 21 in your agenda packet. Give you a chance to read them. Could I please have a mover and a seconder for these minutes? Moved by trustee Evans, seconded by trustee Scott Markey. Are there any errors or omissions in these minutes? Just check. I think I rushed it. I didn't mean to. So. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Business arising from the minutes. Any business arising from those minutes?
No, just some of these things that are on the action list can probably be moved over to completed.
Yeah, I was gonna, they probably.
Or even,
Yeah, because we've done some of them and we need to move them to completed for sure. We'll look at that for the next meeting.
I just have one question on the operations report from the last meeting, which I was absent for. When we talk about the cold temperatures for the buses not running, the minutes have that the buses manufacturing recommendations not to run buses when temperatures are colder than -35. So that is actual temperature. We don't talk about the wind chill.
Actual temperature indeed is what came up a year ago when we were looking at this and was the figure that came from transportation. It's the actual temperature.
Okay.
That was my recall. She was different.
Well, it's just that it's not necessarily just based on the number, it's also just based on what's been happening in our fleet.
Okay.
And how many, for example, during that week were just even plugged in, unable to start.
Okay.
Transportation has discovered that our bus fleet is actually relatively new, and their ability to start in colder temperatures is not as good as what they used to be. And so it is in that 30-degree below where we really start to see those problems occur.
Yes.
I would also say that that's probably the new threshold moving forward.
-30.
About there, yes.
So, and did we ever talk about, like, it is warmer in Hudson's Hope? Like having a regional, like Hudson's Hope might run when Fort St. John doesn't. Do you know, like we're routinely 3 to 4 degrees warmer. So if that put us at -27, you guys are at -30. Was that discussed?
It wasn't discussed, but we do have like, what is good about the process is that it's the supervisor of transportation that makes the decision. And when it's across the region, for example, when it was really, the difference was negligible and it was still kind of -30, that was clearly across the district thing. Yes, we can make individual decisions. In fact, we do on a regular basis throughout the winter where some will run and some will not. We absolutely try not to shut all of them down. It really was due to this increased number, including in Hudson's Hope, of buses that would not start. The good thing is I don't make that decision. We kind of have a process. Our transportation supervisor in contact with all of the drivers, and it's served us fairly well, and it allows us a bit of flexibility in there.
And we've always talked about how different regions have different reasons for why at times buses aren't running in one area where they might be running in a different area.
Any other discussion? Great, we'll move on to 11.3 Policy Committee. Pardon?
Oh, we did, never mind. Sorry.
Did we? Because then I asked a question.
You asked a question.
Okay,
This is
Sorry.
arising, and that was my question, so
Yeah.
now we vote.
So now we go all in favor? announced that. Okay, now 11.3. Policy Committee. So at the last meeting, our policy on childcare, we had the first reading, was moved by Erin. We need a seconder for that policy tonight. Looking for a seconder. Moved by Trustee Gillis, moved by Trustee Gillis, or seconded by Trustee Gillis. So we looked at that policy last time. Is there any further discussion before I call the question?
Just for clarity, so she moved it last time and I'm seconding this time because you have to do it that way?
Yes, that's part of our
And it went out for notice of motion
motion.
last time for the 30 days, and I'm
No
assuming
feedback.
we
from
got no
staff.
feedback.
No feedback from the community.
And then,
Okay.
No,
Is that a policy bylaw type thing where you can only do one?
yeah, you put it out for notice of motion if it's a new policy for 30 days, and then it comes back, because that gives anyone time to give us feedback on policies.
Okay, just wondering why she did the first reading.
Because you have to, when you put it out for notice of motion, somebody has
Yeah,
to move the
and
motion.
someone else to move
And
Gotcha.
then it goes out for notice and then it just comes back to be seconded
Okay.
and voted on.
Gotcha.
All right, calling the question. All in favor? Now, would you like to speak to policy 301?
No, go ahead, you're doing well.
All right, so this one is at the stage that we're only putting it out for notice of motion, so I just need one person to move that tonight, moved by Trustee Evans. Is there any discussion related to the travel policy?
This is just being done because it's time?
Yes,
It's updated? Okay.
It's been looked at.
it's being looked at.
Yeah, no, thanks for the work on this, Terry and Leah and staff. This was brought up, it was moved actually at the provincial council as well, the rates. So it's very timely and it's a good, yeah, the edits are well done. Thank you.
welcome.
Breakfast went up to $12 at the provincial council.
Yeah, that was
the
it.
only change in there.
$1.
$1, yeah, it's up by $1.
Have a second.
So that's moved by Erin. It will go out and we will look at tidying that up at our next meeting.
Point of order, I think it'll probably end up having to be the April board meeting. Then
Okay.
Our next board meeting is in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
That's
it will
right.
have to.
Okay, so it'll be the April board meeting. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
Okay, so it'll be our April board meeting. Okay, moving on to other reports, and we'll start with Erin's update on British Council.
Yeah, so it was a very lively provincial council meeting. Very interesting, first time that the whole provincial council used the voting software. I guess the NIB used the voting software during the NIB meeting, so that was quite interesting. They spent about half an hour at the start of the meeting getting everybody set up, which was good. I was unable to attend any of the pre-meetings that they had to learn to use the software. I found it quite intuitive though, so the software itself was quite intuitive. It was quite easy. It comes up, you hit the green button to go vote, and it's, was fairly simple for me. So that was really good, but even just going through it and having those practice motions for those, even myself and other trustees that maybe weren't able to make those meetings. So it's quite nice that they set it up. It'll be interesting to see how AGM goes. There's 48 motions submitted to AGM with 60 boards across the province and however many trustees attending and voting on 48 motions being submitted. So we don't know if 48 are going to go through to AGM. There might be some that are combined, but it was quite a long day, but that was okay. The budget, so the draft budget was approved at the provincial council. The budget will then go to AGM to be voted on by provincial council at AGM. But if we, I can't remember, I didn't write it down. It'll come out in the minutes when the minutes come out for the provincial council meeting. But if we have any discussion or anybody has any questions on the budget, our fees have been increased across the province. However, we don't have to pay the increased fee this year. It's being covered because of COVID, that they actually have a surplus because there's been no expenses really for travel and things like that. They are looking at a hybrid model, so different ways to do their committee meetings. AGM will still, of course, be face-to-face in the future when we're allowed to go back to face-to-face, but things like the LEDGE committee, Indigenous Ed committee, and Provincial Learning Committee, having those as a hybrid model where, you know, if traveling or no traveling or kind of however that would look. So that will have budget implications in the future. They're not quite sure what yet, but they're looking at that. So it was a very good meeting. The motions all passed. There was lots of debate. The first motion, funding for distributed learning, I honestly thought this would have just gone quick. It didn't. This was probably the longest discussion out of the three of them. There was a motion to table this until later. That motion was defeated. Lots of people were talking about being against this motion because of things like it's only in COVID times, the urban-rural divide, you know, so that this would only help some districts increase funding and not other districts and things like that, and that distributed learning only impacts during COVID times. And so all the districts like ours, there's a few other districts that have large distributed learning group like the Key, and they do a lot of stuff for their students, and similar to what we do, where we offer students in high school opportunity to take courses through distributed learning. Our rural schools have options to take courses through distributed learning to enhance their electives, things like that. As well as, you know, there was just the discussion in favor as well for students who can't maybe necessarily go into the typical classroom for whatever reason, and that distributed learning is a really good option for them. And that all of the school districts that do have a vibrant distributed learning component, they're provincial wide for everybody else to participate in. So anyway, it passed 80%. It was quite a discussion. The second one was on the vaccine priority for workers in public education. There was an amendment to this motion, which was really, really good. So the new motion, and I'll forward this when it comes through BCSTA so that you can all look at it. But the new motion read that the BCSTA requests the Ministry of Health assign high priority to the vaccination of workers in the public education sector when the COVID-19 vaccines become available, as described in the February 19th update to the COVID-19 immunization plan, which states, note, once additional vaccines are approved and become available, people between 18 to 64 who are frontline essential workers or working specific workplaces or industries may be included in later phase 3. And so that last part there was added as described as an amendment. The amendment passed. It cleared up the motion quite a bit. I did make the point, I didn't speak to the other points that we discussed at the board table, but I did make the point that if BCSTA executive, when they bring this to the minister, if they could also ensure that the minister clears up that teachers and school staff are essential workers and not just at the whim of, you know, when they want. So just really put that out there that, you know, our school staff, they're called upon to do a lot of things and that they're not always treated, I think. Right, they can't say you're essential now because of COVID, but now that you're striking, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so just to make sure that that is sort of just out there. So the motion, the amendment passed, the motion passed with 97%. So that was really good. And then the third one, providing accessible and timely information regarding COVID-19 and school safety. we were totally off the mark with this one, I have to say. When we discussed it at the board table, we thought it was about something that was totally not about.
The whole thing, complete motion got completely reworked because somebody said, we don't know what you're asking.
And I kind of said that. Well, sort of. I thought they were asking this, and so that I mentioned that, you know, it's the letters are the last thing. I don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, so what they wanted was really better communication around how safe schools are for students during COVID times. Not about the exposure letters, not about any of that stuff. Just communication out to the public that schools are one of the safest places to be in communities during this time because of the low in-school transmission rates of COVID. So the motion was amended, thank goodness, because I don't think it would have passed if it wasn't amended. And so then the new motion read that BCSTA urged provincial and local health authorities to provide better communication around how safe schools are in regards to COVID-19 and make this available to families and staff on a variety of platforms and languages. So it totally focused it different than
The wrong wording, but yes, I guess.
yeah.
Well, some of the wording's kind of rough and there's a grammar mistake in there, but this is where the concept of unilateral decision by the chair was made because you had it going back and forth between the parliamentarian
Wordsmithing.
and things like that.
It's really a branding image.
That's what it came out
That's what
as.
it really means.
Yes.
When you think of schools, that's a safe, the image that comes to your head is a safe place for my kids.
And right now, the way the communication and media is going, all you hear is exposure notices.
Yeah.
And the whole media focus is on exposures in schools, the exposures in businesses and all of those other kinds of places aren't coming up.
Right, and so it was quite an interesting discussion. I was way off the mark, and it was like until the amendment came, and I was like, okay, so it's not at all what I thought that this motion was about. It's totally different. And then Richmond explained what their motion was, and even then it was like, okay, that's not what you had written here. So it was cleared up. Thankfully, it is around that, you know, what is our image that we project out there? Brand, yeah.
And some of the, on the motion related to teachers or school staff and where they fit in the vaccination program, the amendment took out all of that
Questioning about
not acting under public health and science and going against it because it linked it back to, that provides the context that we think it's important for staff to get the vaccination. And much of the media controversy today was around vaccination, roll-up times for teachers.
So it was really good, and it was a good after discussion too, talking about those exposure letters and, you know, what that does for that branding, that, you know, where it says, you know, are schools safe or not safe, and how people are doing this around the province. In the more dense, so more urban areas where there's a lot more density, they are utilizing rapid testing and genome testing and things like that. So in the more sort of rural areas where the population isn't as dense, it's a little different.
And one of the things that we learned is on the genome testing, you're getting a later notice at times that somebody has tested positive with a variant because there's the genome testing time adds to that. So if you've had the rapid response test and things like that, you added in this other time, and right now that's creating a fair amount of controversy. But Maple Ridge was the first to have a variant in the school, and we did end up with transmission out of it. But
They did not?
they did not.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's the thing, most of the transmissions happening in communities and in businesses, and a very, very, very small percentage are happening within the school system. So that's something that, yeah, all these anyway, it was really good, but it was sort of funny at the end when you know, the executive were kind of like, how are we going to do this with 48 submitted motions if they all get approved? it took a long time just to get the voting process completed for the 3 motions that we had, just to get everybody kind of on board and making sure everybody voted. There was still some trustees that their voting software wasn't working. They couldn't get it to connect and work properly and things like that. So there was always a number of abstentions, which is unfortunate. And I don't know if those were the same districts that couldn't get the voting software and couldn't get it all kind of linked and connected, which is unfortunate. The good positive thing for us and the motion that we brought forward to AGM was you could see how some folks were having issues with internet connectivity, with how fast or slow their internet speed was and things like that, and how it was bogging down some folks' systems. And so that was I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is something that we can bring to the AGM as part of that.
Get a bit of buy-in on that one.
Totally, right? Yeah.
And the element that I don't know has been tested on that voting software at this point is the weighting.
Yeah.
Because when we go to AGM, there will be certain motions that our district only has so many votes on.
That's right.
Because it's based on your your number of votes you have is based on your student population.
Right.
And they couldn't figure out some of the other things. They had amendments to amendments figured out, but then they couldn't figure out how to do a tabling. And so, that took time to sort out, and things like that, yeah. So it was a good test run for AGM, but it'll be interesting with 200 and some trustees and 60 districts and what that's gonna look like. So we might be working in shifts, I'm not sure.
So the three motions that you guys did, why did you do them now? Like
So they look at, so motions that come to provincial council, they look at the expediency of them. So if they're necessary, because budget cycling is coming prior to AGM. So budget, mostly things around budget, right? Or decisions that are coming forward from the ministry that we know are coming forward. So if they're, if they need expediency, then they'll go to provincial council. Otherwise they sit and wait until AGM. So, around testing and budgets and stuff like that.
Okay.
Then the ledge committee doesn't necessarily look at how the motion is written, but they will look at whether or not it's approved to go to provincial council.
Okay.
Based on that.
And the second motion there around the vaccines, just to be clear, the way they wordsmithed and made it better, we are promoting that teachers are classified as essential so that they get into the rollout with the essentials.
Sort of. So how it was worded.
Because to me, it seems like 2 and 3 contradict each other. Let's brand that schools are safe, but oh my God, these teachers need vaccines pretty bad.
Yeah, so what they wanted, so how it was worded for 2 is it says essential workers or work in specific workplaces or industries. So the ministry doesn't necessarily have to say that school staff are essential workers based on how this motion is written and how the amendment was. However, the point I made was that the ministry throughout history, it doesn't matter what government it is or what political stripe the government wears, it's always like this push and pull, you're essential now but not then, and things like that, right? So it's like, let's be clear here, are school staff essential or not? That was just my point that I made. And so they're saying that if they're going to vaccinate other essential workers who are working with people who, with lots of exposure, working with lots of people, parents, kids, stuff like that, that they should be a priority for vaccinations. But at the same time, doing something around saying that schools are still safe places for our kids. So even though we want our teachers to be vaccinated and support staff to be vaccinated, in that category, schools are still safe places for people.
I think that the amendment as it's written, some of our staff might, given they're much younger than these age, actually still be in stage 4 of the vaccine rollout. Mm-hmm. If this goes forward, they could move into stage 3, because in the stage 3 vaccine rollout, there's the idea in there that they would be providing vaccine to people who are in a service where they would be frontline, more in contact with people. And if you go back to way, just seems like so long ago when we were talking about tier 1 and tier 2 for daycare during COVID. Our teaching staff were tier 2, they weren't tier 1. Tier 1 with healthcare and things like that. We're tier 2, and our teachers were in tier 2. And when they came back to school in May, June, it was okay if in order to be at work, your staff needs to have daycare, they can
It goes back to when are they deemed essential and when not.
And that's what I want to say is that I'm glad you brought that forward, because to me, that's what this motion actually really, the intent and what it should be is, are they essential workers or aren't they? Because then that will give them, the Ministry of Health would still stay in the guidelines of them. But I agree with Aaron, you can't say they're essential workers
When they're on strike.
when they're on strike, but yet now you can't, and now they're not essential workers.
I
We've
just don't
got
know
to
what
get
has to do
clear.
with COVID. If they're essential, just because you're essential doesn't mean you need the COVID vaccine.
It moves them
No,
up,
but it works in the tiers of where you sit
Yeah,
for the vaccine.
it just moves them up the line.
yeah.
not all of our staff.
Not all,
Some
but
of
No,
them.
but so,
If we move too many people far up the line, the rest of us could be waiting too long.
But then it'll be herd immunity hopefully, so.
Well,
Because
not
everybody else will
everybody.
have the vaccine.
Yeah.
All right, so still under the BCSTA, we added the agenda item, follow up to the board chair call related to the funding reserve policy feedback. And I didn't have time to do it and put it in the agenda package because the survey only came on Friday. So this is what I handed out to you. The Ministry of Education is consulting with local school district representatives via the BCSTA, BC ASBO, and the BC School Superintendents Association on the development of a number of new financial planning and financial management policies. The new policies support transparency, sound financial planning, and will help end the age-old debate regarding the necessity and appropriateness of districts to hold funds in reserves. These policies are being drafted in response to the recommendations provided by the funding model review panel. Recommendations 14, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 22. With this in mind, BCSTA, BCSSA, and BCASBO are requesting the district engage in a short survey in order to help us represent local Board of Education needs in providing feedback regarding provincial level policies. And it has to be completed by this Friday. Terry and I've invited Natalie and I'm going to look at it tomorrow. It seems so long ago that we were looking at that funding formula changes and spent a lot of time on it. So what I did, just to refresh your memory, was added what those recommendations were. I didn't give you all the background we gathered at the time. I needed to do that piece for me anyway to be able to respond to the survey. There are 10 questions on the survey. Some of them are yes and no questions. They're not using the concept in the questions we have used the concept of an accumulated operating surplus. They're talking about a contingency reserve policy. So there's some difference in vocabulary that they're using compared to what we are. And we did put that policy in place in 2018. And we have a set range of up to 5% in the policy, in our own policy on it. But there are a couple of questions because of the timing of our board meeting and when this has to be, that I thought it would be important to have a little bit more perspective than just mine and Terry's on. We are expected to, in a box, go through what our district's financial planning process is and how we establish priorities and do things like that. Question number 10 is one that I wanted to bring to you to get feedback from you on. It is, What does your school district need from government to be able to prepare a reliable multi-year financial plan? Recognizing that the ministry wants to go to a 3-year budgeting cycle. And I looked at that and went, okay. Hopefully Terry's got some ideas, but there's more heads at the table tonight than mine. So what do we need if we're from government, if we're going to do my multi-year financial?
Well, you need a guarantee, a funding guarantee from that period.
Funding guarantees?
I mean, I guess if they, because they do projections for like how many years out for enrollment, I think like 10 or so, three-year projections for enrollment.
For what we submit, they do have a much longer.
That's what I mean, like
projection.
what's theirs is like quite long if I remember correctly, but I guess if they were to do this, then, you know, if they paid us according to their projections, or is it according to our projections? And if we're conservative on our projections, say that there's, you know, something happens to the economy, and I know that there's still funding protection and stuff, but does that mean that with the amended budgets, it's gonna, I can't wrap my hand around this.
I think there has to be, the one thing that I thought here, if we're going to be going to a multi-year financial planning cycle, we need some safeguards built in for abrupt shifts in population up or down.
Based on commodity prices.
Because
Like
your
gold?
needs can change significantly. In our
Okay,
in our NIB call, one of the things that was mentioned by Fort Nelson is they've really had a hard time because their housing prices have been so low. The Ministry of Children and Families has been moving families up there
yes.
that have really high needs, and they don't have any supports in the community for this influx of high needs population that is probably over and above what would typically be in a population of that size. So there's got to be some safeguards around some of those anomalies.
When do you have to answer the survey?
Pardon?
When
By
is-
Friday.
And you got it on Friday?
No.
Yes. So
Yeah,
really
they give you
short.
12 days to answer it.
No, I got it I just got it this Friday.
7 days.
7 days. And part of the reason, and I know it's a really short turnaround, but the top reason for the short turnaround is because it is the BCSTA that is pushing to have this policy in place around what surpluses can and can't be used for, so that if we've got money, we're not going to be told, oh, we're going to take that back now because we need money everywhere else because of COVID. So the time crunch is partly our own.
I think I still, you know, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around how the ins and outs are going to work. Thank God it's above my pay grade. But I think one of the things that we should really consider too is the percentage of surplus that we can hold should be increased then from, I can't remember where it's at right now.
We've said 5% in our policy.
Yeah, and I think that they're trying to make it provincial wide across the board, but I think it should be, you know, at least minimum 5% to like 8%. I don't know, but we should have they should guarantee a certain percentage of our budget that we can hold as surplus if they're gonna move to this 3-year budget. I don't have an issue with 3-year budgeting. I think it can help better with planning, but it's just how are they gonna ensure that, I don't know.
We could,
David?
okay.
Sorry.
No, we could boom or bust here within a year and like lose 1,500 kids or gain 1,500 kids in a year.
That happened to us one year, so
You know, like,
not 1,500, but
And boards are held to account for that. So it's, you know, I mean, I really did mean that we need a better crystal ball. Because, sorry.
Go ahead. Ida, then back to you.
Going back to the safeguards, we have to somehow, where if you're a district that you're fiscally accountable for it, you shouldn't lose the same as everyone that isn't. because that's happened before. Like if you're following the rules and you do everything and stuff, and then someone else isn't, they end up having a bigger, so we need to somehow have a safeguard on, if you're fiscally accountable, you shouldn't get targeted to get money taken away from you.
Just to echo safeguards, so please capture that. Staff would appreciate if trustees, my understanding of this is that the BCSD is wanting to take the lead so that it's not done unto us later on down the road.
Absolutely.
I'll just let trustees know that sort of, since I moved into this position, I've tried to make sure that in terms of our reserves, we're appropriating it for educational initiatives.
Not any.
The literacy initiative,
Yeah.
the numeracy initiative, and the learning support model.
Yep.
Whatever you do, just please protect our ability to appropriate and allocate those monies to schools, because we send that directly to schools to supplement the 17
Next question.
funding.
Yeah, yes, I echo that, but I also want to say too that there needs to be a promise in there too, that in year 2 of this, there's no administrative savings of 30%.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, what? Well, sorry, Nicole wants me to explain the administrative savings.
Go for it.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so a few years back, we had to do administrative savings across the province where they cut, what was it, Terry, 30% off the top?
Yeah, she's
I
on
don't think she's.
Yeah, I think it was around 30%. They were just putting that into play when I went into retirement the first year, but it was 20 or 30%, yeah.
And then the next year, there was another percentage that we had to cut. So I think it was maybe 30% overall over 2 years. And it really stretched. And we had to do it at the top, at the administrative level, and it really stretched our staff quite a bit. And I think it was hard on us to do that. I mean, we survived, but it was tough.
And that's where my comment comes in, because it was 30% to every district, and we were a growing district. We already were fiscal accountable for having as minimum as we could have for staff, and then we had to do this where other districts, they had more staff and stuff, but it was across the line, the 30%.
Yeah.
So what you're looking for is more of a, again, not across the line, it's more regional in.
Well, even if, like, for
Some
example,
districts would really
some districts had like 2 assistant superintendents, 2 assistant secretary treasurers, and in the province.
Right.
And so when the government looked at it, and they said, well, you have to have a 30% cut. Our district, that we didn't have any of those, to be able to, we still had to do the 30%.
Yeah.
So that would be a
Can
comment
you give
to
us a
look
week
at.
so we can hire a bunch of people?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
to look at,
Exactly.
things shouldn't be done clear across the board. Yeah. If they're looking for input.
Number
David
11.
wanted to.
No,
Sorry, David.
3 years from now, it could be a completely different board, and we're kneecapping. I mean, I don't know, I'm not making this survey any easier. for
No,
you, but
it's okay.
I'm just being like, I understand what they want. I'm cautious.
To be
So,
clear, this is actually about what you want as trustees, not what the government wants. And so it really, I think what it is flexibility is the key word, to protect that very thing regardless of who the board is. I just might add, if it's okay, Chair, that whether it's a school level budget, district level budget, or provincial level budget, nor can we have vast sums of money unspent.
Yeah.
Because we pay very close attention to that at the school level, because that money ethically is supposed to be spent in the year that it was allocated.
For those kids.
So whatever you come up with has to be a reasonable approach in terms of what the government is seeing in pockets around the province where there are vast unencumbered, unappropriated
Funds.
funds.
And that's not being fiduciary, fiscally responsible. That's not upholding our fiduciary responsibilities as trustees, right?
I'm glad we went from 6.4 million in reserves down to 2.
Yeah. Our kids need it.
Exactly. I mean, we can't run a deficit but we can't run another
Another-
surplus.
Yeah, and how long is this for? So-
Sorry.
Was?
Okay, number 11, and this goes back to some of the huge questions around people are feeling that the money that they've managed to put together to be through fiscal responsibility has had to go on things that the ministry doesn't necessarily fund. So through the funding formula review, there was a real desire to figure out what the ministry was funding and what we were going to fund through reserves. So question number 11 is, what should be included or decided in a provincial level surplus policy, and what should be included and decided in a local level surplus policy?
The percentage of what we can have in surplus should be provincial, and then whether it's restricted or unrestricted should remain within the board's purview. That's my thought.
Also,
The percentage that we can hold in reserve should be provincial, so how much we can hold, whether it's 5%, 6, whatever, 8%, whatever. But whether or not that fund is restricted or unrestricted should be left up to the boards to decide.
There's been a lot of concern expressed about the fact that, okay, we're going to give you a new school project, we see you have so much in reserves, you gotta give us some of this. And the school districts involved may have had that reserve earmarked themselves for other things within the district, and it's been assumed it can go for capital projects and taken. So that's where some of that yin and yang has come from.
I'm just saying that then your feedback could be quite helpful to them in terms of, don't across the entire board assume that it's always a percentage of a building project that they take from your reserves.
That's right.
One district may have lots of money, the other has been prudent or is going to educational programs. Please don't ask us then to take a percentage of that for a building project.
That's
Yeah.
part of what's going on.
Because they did that to us too with, was it Mount Murray where they did that? They told us we had to take so much out of our reserves and put it into Mount Murray, and
But we had no reserves.
we did, but what if we had a project that we needed, roof cave? Well, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, there's lots of concerns about what we talked about in the survey regarding capital funding, that the annual facilities grants and some of those other grants don't really cover what our maintenance costs are. And this is one place that when we have an emergency, we can draw from if we have an amount that's left unrestricted. That what Erin's asking and what makes sense is we get to decide that. For example, in our current reserves, we have some funding that we've restricted over 3 years to go towards some of the projects to support schools, but we have an amount that isn't necessarily at this point allocated, and that would be our emergency. So it would be up to us as a board to say, okay, how much do we leave and where do we leave it?
also too, Helen, as a northern district, we keep some, capital aside for summer months for construction times where, that may fall outside of sort of that AFG timeline, where we have to do stuff, right, because that's our construction season. And so that's another thing too for restricted and unrestricted, that we should be able to kind of decide that.
So the next question, and it was these open-ended questions I really wanted some feedback on. What should be included or decided in a provincial level financial planning policy? Because what's going to come out of this is new provincial policy related to those recommendations and the Auditor General's report, and what should be in a local level financial policy. And when I look at our financial policy, I think the policies that we have some of the things that should be in place, but if we had other thoughts, this is where it would go. So we have an accumulated operating surplus policy. We have the Finance and Audit Committee policy, and we just looked at our audit committee terms of a reference, and that is firing up. So is there anything that we want in the provincial and we want left in the local. Because if your provincial policy gets really broad, then it becomes very prescriptive and we lose some local autonomy.
Yep.
So what do we want them to tell us and what do we want to be able to tell ourselves?
Well, that we have to have an audit committee, but how we set that up is on our own. When these reports are due, but how we do that is up to us. Those kinds of things, like say, okay, here's your bookend, but how you get there is up to you. Here's your goalpost. How you score the goal is your choice, but you got to score that goal, right? So let's start this day. You have to have a committee. You have.
How is this different from the previous question?
I don't know.
And the reason I ask
Well,
is not to question
okay,
what you're
that's
asking for, but is it this, I might have misunderstood the question. Is it not the same thing that we want to be able to decide how to use the unrestricted funds?
No, this
Is
is
that
overall financial planning policy that would make sure, like, if you look at it, we have, in how we're doing our business, we have checks and balances where we go out and gather information. And Terry, step in anytime, Terry. We have stuff where we go out, we talk to people about what their needs are. There's an ebb and flow to what we do within our budgets. It's about the process. We allocate back to schools on an equitable per pupil basis when we put money out to schools. All of those kinds of things go into the financial planning policy. And we have some policy, we don't actually have something that says this is our financial planning policy, but there's some ways of doing business that turn up in the Finance and Audit Committee policy 1011 that are there. And there may be out of the provincial policy some more direction, but I think what I'm hearing from the BCSTA is they want to make sure that whatever gets put in place protects big districts, little districts, looks at the unique needs of the province. And there's a lot of people that really feel, I should say, there are some districts that feel what the ministry, with what they're insisting on in the framework for enhancing student learning report, that boards have to give back to the minister in September, is already too prescriptive, and the board and the province is impinging on local autonomy. We've got lots of things in place where we can demonstrate and come with some of the kind of responsibility with how we plan things and what we do with money that don't appear to be necessarily across the province. BCSTA pushed for some extra time to get this survey out to us. They're not sure that they're going to have the time to have, once these things are decided, to have the policy come back to us to look at again. The assumption is that all of that, a lot of out to the field work was done through the funding formula review, and a lot of the out to the field work has already been done. But we've had so much focus on COVID, this kind of got lost in the shuffle. And now, due to what could happen out of COVID in terms of economic recovery and financing, there's a bit of a hurry to get it done.
Yeah, like I'm surprised our association would give us 7 days to respond to something like this. Because what if we didn't have a board meeting this week?
Well, that their concept was that board chair, go and do that with your secretary treasurer, and superintendent, sorry, Steve.
That's okay, no.
Your secretary treasurer.
I don't want to be in that meeting.
Yeah, your secretary treasurer and superintendent are gonna have the knowledge to help you bring back your
Okay.
local. But fortunately, we have an interim secretary treasurer right now that has broad experience that I can draw on with my fellow trustees to do this survey. There will be places where this doesn't come to a board table, but with the timing of our meetings, when we got it on Friday and I had time to put something together for tonight, I would rather bring it back to you because there was that time.
So I don't know if the province should dictate this or not, but it's something to just maybe keep in the back of your brain if you're doing another board chair's call on this is, what happens to those districts that have social enterprises?
Well, and you see.
Right, like malls, rental revenue, you know, revenue from that, revenue from different sort of streams. So what happens to that revenue? Can districts use that to, you know, outside of the regular budget to do kind of what they want? Because if that's the case, I think that should be allowed to stay that way. And I wouldn't want that to be like, well, because you're getting $100,000 a month on renting out Kingsway Mall, you know, that comes off your budget that the province provides you. I don't know, is that?
If you look at the panel review recommendations, they were
Yeah, I saw
14,
that.
16, 18, 19, 20. You'll notice 21 is missing. 21 is related to if boards have local revenue generating mechanisms, like some of the districts that have been making money off of international schools, it's a huge amount.
Yeah.
So the concept is that if you've been making, as a district, have been making money, the recommendation was that shouldn't be able to be touched or brought into financial count. That's right. The financial picture. So 21 isn't here to be looked at. And I think the concept that came back to them from the funding formula review is if we've come up with some ways to make money that allow us, because of our position in the district or whatever, to do that, then you shouldn't be able to take it. And so I don't think they're looking at that. And that's why it's not there.
Because I think if we do that, we should, you know.
And I know it's late, but I'll just put out there, not to be resolved tonight. West Vancouver School District is about the same size as School District 60.
Mhm.
They bring in about an extra $5 to $6 million a year surplus just from their international program after costs.
Mhm.
So I understand what trustees are saying around individual district flexibility. We're part of a northern association of school districts who don't really necessarily have that same ability. So I know it's not related to the surplus question. All I'm saying is that northern districts will always be at a disadvantage.
So,
Right, get to work.
what I think what you're saying, and I agree, is, so if Northern Vancouver is the same size as us, or West,
Yeah, West Side.
so same population of kids, but they have this mechanism, we're never gonna have to make $6 million extra dollars, then that is a burden off the provincial government. They maybe do have to fund them a bit less and fund us more.
And I'm
Like
distracting you from, because it's not even.
Like
on-
I do agree that it's not like they went out and found this gold mine and they cherished it. They have that potential.
But I think we have the potential to, if we choose to, make money in other ways that maybe they don't. And so I think that,
Not that much.
you know, I don't know,
I think that that's how the province works, is like, if somebody has you know, like they take our oil, they dam our Peace River and fund down there. So I think, I think what I hear what Stephen's saying is that maybe you take it more regional. So NIB will never make,
yeah.
there will never be a district making $6 million on international students.
Well, Coquitlam, how much does Coquitlam make? They have a full international school that, yeah,
But you'll remember
but
that
their board makes.
we
$50
have
a
more
year.
money that's coming to us from those rural and unique geographic factors, and that money did get increased last year. Ida?
But we also have to remember that, when they're looking at the budget, it can't be the same for everyone, because we have to travel to do things where a lot of places don't. We don't have the ability to hire some certain staffing, so they have to go out to do that. And I think that has to, somewhere in the budget, if they're doing a 3-year budget, they have to look at that, because I agree, like, if, for even your arts and your cultural and your stuff, if you're in a bigger community, they just do those things, or they can sports even, they can go from this one to this one, where we don't have that opportunity at all. So I think it's really gotta be regional. Something's gotta be regional.
So the plan is that, and I still have to reach out to Madeline because she is the audit finance, on audit finance, and we haven't actually formally elected a chair, but I know she's willing to stand as chair of that committee.
I'll elect her.
So, I thought I would invite her to this meeting tomorrow. Obviously, I'm not gonna have everything done on the survey. I'll probably send it Thursday. If you've raised it, I can send those questions out if you want more think time. But it was an opportunity to bring it to you tonight and to get some feedback, so I took it. Was there anything left for BCPC, Ida, that you wanted to bring up?
I was just going to say that I did send out, the same as everything else now, Pro-D and spring training and stuff is being done on Zoom. So I did send out some information to trustees and the staff of some of the courses that BCPC are offering.
Okay, board Pro-D committee. This is where kind of I'm at with that. In the summer, when we did our advance, we said we would set up one. What came through our work at Summer Advance is our key thing is financial literacy. So I have asked Terry to work out a financial literacy presentation, and we'll start with that. We're just trying to work out a timeline as to when she can do that. There are some huge advantages for us now to have Terry in that capacity. One, BCSTA would hire her to do the same work. So we know that there's a confidence. She now has, lucky her, a knowledge of us and the rest of our district to kind of bring together. So we're working on a date for that. And we'll bring that back to you. Once we've done that piece, I will look at actually establishing that the Pro-D committee to start to work on what we would like to look at advance. There are things we just haven't got to with all of the time that we've spent on COVID. It has not been dropped, and it will come back to you. So there wasn't any correspondence, I don't think. And so we don't have any unfinished business. New business, no. PRNTA update, I don't know, we'll get Stephen to check to see.
I'll check that. Did you?
She said that she didn't have a report when she moved.
Okay, thank you.
She had no report,
I have nothing from here to report.
and we've had nothing come from either QB or DPAC. Were there any questions from the press and public? All right, so we did have some in-camera motions, didn't we, that each come forward for implementation?
A motion.
You move that, do you have a seconder? Seconded by
Trustee
Trustee
David.
Scott Moncrief. Right. So,
All those in favor?
that being said, I know we've,
All those in favor?
all those in favor, thank you. I keep forgetting that question.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn. Do I have a second? Seconded by Trustee Snow. All in favor? Thank you for hanging in tonight. It was a longer meeting, but I feel way better talking through that survey than just doing it without having had the opportunity to